What happens if we colonize the moon? It's not a fantasy at all. The idea of colonizing the moon has been studied by scientists for many years. The idea of colonizing space, whether on the moon or elsewhere, is hotly contested. Some contend that space colonization is one approach to fulfilling our moral obligation to prevent the extinction of our species. Others count that it's a science fiction to live in space and that we should focus on enhancing life on Earth rather than potentially destroying another planet or moon. Welcome to Fly Me to the Moon, where you can get all your exciting videos about space life. Do subscribe to our channel if you're curious about space life. Darby Diar, Professor of Astronomy and Geology at Mount Holyoke College, says the moon is to people today what the New World was to Europeans 600 years ago. They had been there a few times, said Diar, but it took time to work up the courage to send people there to stay. We often like to compare the colonization of the Americas to the colonization of the moon, Mars and other planets. The first time we went there, we wanted to plant a flag and did some exploring before returning. In the second stage, we built semi-permanent outposts that were still heavily dependent on supplies from home. In the third stage, we built proper self-sustaining economies that completed with the colonizing countries. How would this approach work on the moon though, which may be our next frontier, as if it's so different from wherever we have gone before? Why do we want to populate the moon at all then? After all, the environment in space is quite hostile, so it wouldn't really benefit us here on Earth, would it? Space is cool and all, but after we've been to the moon a few times and paid a few visits, why would we want to stay there? After Apollo 17 in 1972, hardly much actually transpired. The moon actually has a lot going for it, aside from tourism and the whole don't put all your eggs in one basket argument. First off, there are several materials that we might readily obtain from the moon, including helium-3, which is crucial for fusion reactors. Although there aren't many resources on the moon that we can't get in larger amounts on Earth, the moon's lower gravity makes it much easier to construct and launch spacecraft and refuel them than on Earth, which will make colonizing other planets easier in the future. Of course, examining the moon's economics is a step too far, even though it played a significant role in our decision to return there. After all, we still need to set up bases to mine these resources and construct these spacecraft modules, and aside from these bare elements, the moon offers us very little. Because we won't be constructing our ships and colonies out of wood, the shortage of trees may not be an issue. The Americas had the essential resources needed to support human life. Although the colonists had to bring a lot of supplies with them when they arrived in the Americas, those supplies mainly consisted of food and water to last them through the ocean voyage, as well as enough soil to begin farming and that had previously supported human civilizations, something the moon of course don't, so they could start an outpost right away. Furthermore, because the Americas had an atmosphere, the colonists didn't need to bring their own air with them. In addition, the moon had far lower gravity than Earth, which can have disastrous effects on one's body while making it easier to launch anything into orbit. Keep in mind that even with stronger curtains to block out the midnight sun, the moon's day is 1 month long since it's tidally locked to the Earth. This means that the solar panels will go for 2 weeks without receiving any sunlight. The shortage of food, drink, and air can overcome easily, despite the fact that dealing with gravity will be considerably more difficult. We could grow food in our trash in a Martian manner, recycle air and water like we do on our space stations, and gather hydrogen and oxygen from the moon itself, which would be valuable for making rocket fuel. It's also important to consider why we choose to focus on the moon in this video. The answer is straightforward. The moon has several advantages over places like Mars and the moons of Jupiter, since it's the home to a species that is only just beginning to explore space. Since the moon is only 400,000 kilometers from Earth, it takes much less time and fuel to travel there. Because these are cosmic distances, the communication delay is only 1.3 seconds, which means that real-time communication, such as video chat, is almost possible. Live streams are entirely feasible since there's a delay there anyway. This really implies that journey will be far shorter than crossing the Atlantic by ship, as a one-way trip typically takes approximately 3 or 4 days. Additionally, since the orbits of Earth and Mars are diametrically opposed, you can only send objects between them during specific times of the day. This is because interplanetary travel involves expanding your orbit on one side so that you will eventually cross paths with the other planet on the other side. The moon, of course, doesn't have that issue, making it much easier for a crew in an emergency to replenish or escape entirely. The moon is also an ideal location for us to perfect the methods we'll use to colonize other celestial bodies so that we don't have to evacuate them. Water and food are our major requirements. Let's see if they are available on the moon. All life is based on water. It's impossible to survive on the moon without water. Additionally, it's a prerequisite for producing electricity and growing food. After all, power plants use evaporating water to turn their turbines. All lunar mining attempts should be abandoned if water cannot be found. Fortunately, there is plenty of water on the moon. It's prevalent on both the surface and below the surface. This is crucial since it will be more difficult to find subsurface water than surface water. NASA has calculated that there may be at least 600 million metric tons of water on the moon's surface. This is plenty for mining residents, but not for a sizable lunar population. So the moon has water, but where's the food? There is no air since the moon does not have an atmosphere. There is just carbon dioxide to support plant growth in the absence of air. The necessary fertile soil is likewise absent from the moon. The issue of sunshine is another. The moon has been in darkness or light for roughly 13 days. This might prevent food from growing. Furthermore, without an ozone layer, damaging UV rays will kill plants before they can mature. Due to costs of carrying food to space, moon gardening is also being investigated. We know now how expensive it is to send things into space. The main issue with utility metal farming is actually its cost. The same holds true for food. No space station will invest millions of dollars into transporting some Doritos into space. Additionally, there are other options than delivering food to the moon or for long-term settlements. Fortunately, researchers are investigating strategies to support space farming. However, specific workarounds are still required to support alien farming. After all, agriculture will be the primary source of oxygen for humanity. Consider for a moment that all problems with moon farming have been overcome. We have the soil necessary to plant long-term crops. On the moon, there is an ample quantity of water to support plant growth. Then we can start an industrial colony and have enough food to eat. How about gas escaping into space? On the moon, atmospheric loss is frequent. It frequently happens during the day. Due to this atmospheric loss, the moon's supply of plant-produced gas is in danger of running out. In such circumstances, the gases must be contained for usage or recycling. The same holds true for agricultural materials. Plants must be housed in shelters to keep the oxygen they release inside. The basic requirement for human breathing is a lot of oxygen. Each hour, people use 50 liters of oxygen. However, the typical leaf generates 5 milliliters of oxygen per hour. This indicates that an adequate supply of oxygen for one typical person would require 10,000 leaves. The plant's breathing cycle is not included in this. The typical oak tree can produce between 150,000 and 200,000 leaves. When kept in its own space, such a tree can supply 15 people's daily needs for oxygen. However, oak trees are, unfortunately, quite large. In that sense, they are similar to the world trees. On the moon, trees may grow on their own with no effort. Examples of trees that have lived and flourished there can be found by NASA. The problem isn't growing the trees here, it's in the retention of oxygen production. By constructing subsurface lunar shelters, oxygen can be retained. This has the benefit of lessening the occurrence of air leaks. Additionally, it guarantees that radiation from the moon won't harm the trees. The damage caused by meteor impacts on the surface constructions will also decrease. This will call for intricate architecture and area control. And that is all for today's video. If you've enjoyed it, then give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel so that you can actually fly to the moon through our videos. Check out some other videos on our channel as well, and we'll see you in the next video.